welcome to E-Tree's Enhancements. In this video, we will be installing Cajun Gun Works Short Reset Kit number 1. So the last video, which might not have uploaded yet, but I will be uploading it, was to convert a standard SP01 or safety model CZ75 into a Shadow. And it was a fairly cheap kit, but there was a few things that I don't like. That's for one, if you were to use it on USPSA, you wouldn't be able to fit it into certain categories, or you actually wouldn't even be able to run it in IPSC or IDPA if you wanted to convert it to the Shadow. So if you do want to run your SP01 in that sort of competition, then you would need to retain the safety plunger that's in it. If you would have just bought a Shadow, you wouldn't have that issue because that's how they come factory. So basically what they want is they don't want you removing any safeties. If the safeties weren't there from the get-go, then it's not a problem, but if you remove it, it's a problem. Why? I have no idea. Continuing on, what we will be installing again is this Cajun Gun Works Short Reset Kit SRS-1. I decided to go with SRS-1. I really didn't want to go down to 11.5 pound hammer spring. So currently, the current configuration of this gun is it has a modified Shadow hammer from CZ Custom. It's a 15 pound hammer spring from CZ Custom. Shadow original recoil spring with a polymer guide rod for the round wire spring instead of flat wire spring, and obviously the lock grips. But it still has its firing pin block in there, as you can see. But the issue that I have with it is the fact that your reset itself is substantially longer. And then you have the take up. And then that's, what I don't like. If you remove the safety plunger, you have your reset and then immediately you're already at your wall, which is what prompted me to get the short reset kit. Now there's only one company that makes a short reset kit, and that is Cajun Gun Works, so that's pretty much where you have to go. Now let's move on. So the first thing you're gonna want to do is remove your slide. Line them up. Set it aside. Pull the slide off. We'll set this aside for now. We won't be needing it as we will be starting with the frame itself. Remove your grips. And then the first thing we're going to do is pull the mag brake out. We will use this tiny little punch. Push it out. Mine only comes out from left to right for some reason. And then the mag brake, this mag brake's already modified, so it's relatively easy to remove. This little tang, I just broke it off. I did modify the top of it so it couldn't slide as far up as the original does, because what that tail does is actually pull it down. So you don't want this slipping off and then preventing you from doing a mag reload. And let's continue. Let's pull the hammer spring up. Push down on the table, and there's my 15 pound hammer spring from CZ Custom. We actually will be replacing this with the Cajun Gun Works. And now we can continue on removing the sear cage. So the way I like to remove this is if you actually just set it on safety. Now, this is a Shadow hammer thing where you can actually put it on safety while it's in half cock, but you can put it on safety and that brings that little spring up a little higher than it would if you weren't. I don't know if you can see that, but push it up, push on the safety, and that brings it right out. Move this guy out of the way. There you go. And then I'd like to hold it vertically because there's this little detent or piece of metal that holds the right hand side safety on and prevents it from coming out. Keep it straight, pull it out, and that brings it completely out. Let's set this aside. At this point, you can probably grab the kit, but let's take it apart for a second. There's this little tiny spring that actually holds this guy in. We're going to be reusing that spring, and prevent us from losing everything out of place. We're just going to push it in from right to left. Be careful with that little spring because that thing will shoot out. Put your finger over it. And that little spring, again, is so small. You don't want to lose this. If you're afraid of losing it, go ahead and order one with the kit. Probably worthwhile. I decided to be cheap. So anyway, moving forward, grab a little kit, and we're going to grab the replacement of this piece. You'll be able to identify because it is silver. I don't know if it's stainless steel or what, but it is silver. So the first thing you're going to do is put it in from the top. It can be done from the bottom or the top. You're just going to put it in, and you're going to push the pin in till it captures it. And we're going to take the little spring, and this is the tricky part, and you're going to put it in like so from the top. You can also put it slightly to the side and pop the springing, but there's this little groove on the edge of this, which I'll show you on this one right there. This little groove where the spring sits, and that's what we're trying to do. So unfortunately, this is a pain in the butt, and if you do it wrong, you might end up losing the spring. So we're gonna try and take this gently. You kind of want to push it through till you see the spring coming. That way you can push the pin in, not very hard, just enough to capture it and prevent it from flinging out. You can keep using the screwdriver to push it through, and then use a pin or a punch to slide that little spring in until it clears. At this point, once it clears, you just make sure to use a different punch that has a flatter base. Just kind of run it around, and that's it. Push the pin through all the way. Kind of have to guide the sear in a little bit better. Make sure that this thing is seated, which it is in the groove, and working as it should. So from there, you're pretty much done on the sear cage. At least this is if you have a safety model. If it is a decocker model, whole different story. I would definitely recommend watching a YouTube video on how to disassemble this. Continuing, making sure you still have that little piece of metal right here. I don't know if you can see it right there, which holds, basically sticks out right here. Kind of hard to see, but it holds your right hand side. This is only on SPO1s with this style right hand side safety. If you have a CZ75, it will more than likely just not have that at all. Or you could have another CZ75, which is a tumbler style, but I'm not really sure how to tear those apart. I'm sure there's plenty of videos on how to do it. Anyway, so at this point, probably a good idea to throw a little bit of lube on it, because, you know, it's kind of a hard to reach area. So let's do that. Right here on this little ramp, a little bit on the face. Probably not necessary in all places, but anywhere you see rub marks on, probably a good idea to put on. So then at this point, we're gonna take it, again, making sure you didn't lose that little piece, and go ahead and stick it on. Make sure it seats down properly. There we go. At this point, you take your thumb safety, start running it through. Something to lift the spring itself for the sear. There you go, starts pushing through. And then before you put it in all the way, it's a good time to take your right hand side safety, put it in, flip it around, and then you just have to push these two together till they line up. There we go. They're lined up. At this point, you probably can't go any further because you need to basically push that little detent for the safety backwards. A little section right here. You have to push it back. When it's disassembled, you'll get a good view of it. But I basically just stick a flathead screwdriver and just push it back. And then once you push it back, if you're putting tension on it, it'll snap into place. And then one last thing you gotta do is make sure the spring is seated properly, which it was not. And there we go, seated properly. Make sure your safety works, and you can now move on. So the next thing we're gonna do is install the hammer spring that comes with the kit, which is a 13-pound hammer spring if you bought the SRS-1. I believe the SRS-2 comes with the 11.5 one as well, and a few other things. I really can't remember off the top of my head. So at this point, you stick your hammer spring in, make sure the hammer's all the way forward. And then if it doesn't go in all the way through, just kind of wiggle it, push it back in, and then just make it even on both sides. And that's it. Let's test the double action. Appears to be working. Single. Make sure the safety works, which it does. You don't want to let it fall around the sear cage. That would be a big no-no. Take the mag brake, put it in. First the bottom, then the top. Mag brake pin. Shove it through. There's the mag brake held. Make sure it's even on both sides. You know, it gets kind of captured by the grips themselves. I want to make sure that's in there well. Now I can start putting the grips back on. I like to always start these with my finger just to make sure I don't cross thread them. You really got to make sure that mag brake's in the right place, because again, the grips are what hold the mag brake from moving side to side, and they also prevent the pins themselves from coming out. That's that for this guy. Let's set this guy aside. At this point, we're going to take our slide apart, take the barrel out, the recoil spring. This is the shadow recoil spring, and we're going to take this apart. At this point, you're going to take in my case, what I've been using is an 1/8 inch punch, where I punch that roll pin out, and then actually the 1/8 inch, usually they say it's a 3mm, but the 1/8 inch punches work fantastically. It actually is loose in it, so it's not going to damage anything. Punch that pin out, and we'll remove the firing pin and the firing pin block, and I'm going to do that off camera because I've got a vise that'll hold on to it. So once you punch the roll pin out with the 1/8 inch punch, again, it'll fit just fine. You will have the firing pin being held by the firing pin block, at which point to release, finger over it, press the firing pin block, and it'll release it, pull it out, and that'll capture it again. So you got to press it out, press it through again, and then that'll bring it out. So there's your firing pin. You put your thumb over the firing pin block before, otherwise it'll shoot out. And there you'll have your firing pin block spring, and then you got to reach down in there and then pull the original firing pin spring out of there. So out of those pieces, you're going to take your firing pin spring, and your firing pin block spring out of here. You can just kind of stack them together like that and get them out of the way. From here, this is pretty much the last of the kit itself. And then of course your old roll pin, which this one is still in good condition. I'm going to keep for now. Probably not the wisest to reuse it, but if you're in a pinch, it helps. All right, so the kit itself comes with a brand new firing pin. From my knowledge, it is an extended firing pin, and it is. It's definitely extended slightly, but yes, it is an extended firing pin. Comes with a lightweight firing pin spring, which goes on it like so. It actually seems to grab a hold of it. Yeah, it's a good thing, because if you ever had one of these shoot out, usually the firing pin will come out and then the spring will come out and you'll lose the spring. It's pretty sketchy, to be honest. We'll just put that in there with the spring, firing pin block spring as well, and it just goes in there. It appears to be also captive. No, there's a side that creates less grit, so we're gonna go with that. I don't think there's a specific side to this, so I'm gonna go with this side specifically. Now would be a good time to polish your firing pin block if you need to. So first things first is we're gonna put the firing pin block in with the new spring in this orientation with the opening towards the center. Put that in. I'm gonna take a firing pin with our new firing pin spring. I'm gonna put that through. Probably gonna need the help of a punch to really push that firing pin block out of the way. And then the firing pin, we do need to make sure it's in the right orientation. So from here, I'm gonna push it, make sure that the flat side is towards the top, and then the firing pin block will catch it. The next thing you got to do is push it in, and then potentially right here, the best option would be for you to take the same 1/8 inch punch and push it in through the firing pin retaining pin hole to basically contain it and prevent it from coming out and make sure everything's aligned. So once you do that, now you can take the last part of your kit, which is the new heavy duty roll pin, and install it onto it. You can basically tap it in. And basically what I do is I put the slide on a vise and keep this in, and I'll start tapping it in initially with a hammer till this actually starts retaining the firing pin. Once I do that, then I remove the firing pin or the punch and actually start hammering it in. That way I can make sure that it's not going to jam itself against the firing pin itself. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be back on camera. Okay, so I installed my roll pin fully in there, even on both sides, with the new firing pin in. One thing I like to do whenever I do this is the firing pin block likes to bind up. So I like to just literally just do this multiple times, and it'll help that specific spring find its place. And then it'll be nice and smooth without it having to, like, sometimes you'll feel the spring bind a little bit and you'll hear a click or feel a click. Once you do that, it kind of settles and then it's fine. So at this point, firing pin block, firing pin, and the springs have been installed. And the last but not least, the little roll pin from Cajun Gun Works, which is stiffer than the factory original. So at this point, you can pretty much just put it back together. It's complete. It is significantly different. Not huge. I don't know if I'd qualify that as the best upgrade in the world as far as short reset. Okay, yep, you know what? It is noticeable. It's only so much that you get. The reset length is more noticeable when you install a shadow hammer or any kind of upgraded hammer, because it actually moves. It does run shorter teeth, or I guess you could call them lugs, on the hammer, but it does it by having more material, not by making the teeth shorter, but by making this little step higher. So therefore your sear actually sits like if it was getting pulled constantly. So basically sits a little bit higher up, which makes your trigger pull get pulled a little bit farther back than where it normally would. So therefore that geometry difference makes your reset even longer, or makes it feel a lot longer than it would be on a standard hammer. So the short reset kit should help solve that. Basically makes the plunger have to move not as high. I really don't want to have to go through explaining everything, but you get the idea. Basically, it just helps you shorten the reset. The plunger spring helps reduce the weight of that, so you don't have to feel it as much in the trigger pull. And, you know, you get the added reliability of a 13-pound hammer spring with all the reductions and everything to compensate the firing pin spring. And, you know, it's just a balancing act pretty much. But they're proven, and Cajun Gun Works knows what they're doing, so the spring setup is actually fantastic. And actually it improved the trigger feel substantially just by that firing pin block plunger spring. It's definitely almost like it's not even happening. And then of course the trigger pull, which we should do with a dummy round. Make sure the safety still works, which it does. Now let's try the double action from half cock. Smooth as butter. Try it from fully forward. Fully forward would be if you were USPSA and you had to start with the hammer fully down because you don't have a decocker. Put that to the test. So that's actually still off the scale. Really don't know what's going on with that 13-pound hammer spring. Let's try it from half cock. Could just be the shadow hammer. Shadow hammers actually sit a little bit farther forward when they're in half cock. The decocker models or the standard hammers actually sit over here in half cock. So that could be adding to the extra weight. So the double action from half cock is actually 8 pounds. Yep, right at 8 pounds. Yeah, 3.5 pounds. Okay, so we're back basically where I was. Oh yeah, yep. Oh, yep, there's definitely a difference. So yeah, if you were interested in installing a short reset kit, definitely feels like it's worth the money. I don't know, I haven't put it to the test, but it definitely seems like it's a great idea if you're looking to do something like mine in particular, where you don't really care about the trigger itself, where essentially what you would be spending on is $45 for the shadow hammer. You do have to fit it yourself, so be aware of that. And then about $62 for the short reset kit, and that's about it. You get a fantastic trigger, something similar to what a Shadow 2 is, for about $110. If you really want to spend on a recoil spring, that's also a good option. That will definitely put it in Shadow performance. The only thing you won't have is the sights, but definitely worth the money, especially if you're like me and you purchased this gun, or basically not even purchased, traded for this gun. You didn't go out and spend any actual money out of pocket for it. Kind of stuck with an SP01 even though you wanted a shadow, or you just could only afford the SP01 and wanted a shadow. Either way, definitely a $100 upgrade that definitely makes a difference. Keep an eye out for my other video as far as installing or converting the standard SP01 into a shadow, as that'll teach you how to fit the CZ custom shadow hammer, which again is $45, and that's a bargain. It's not a standard shadow hammer. It does have to get modified to fit in the CZ75 style slides like the SP01, but either way it's only $45, so it's definitely worth it. Keep in mind you still pay for shipping, so technically $55. Definitely worth the upgrade, and I would highly recommend it. Anyway, thanks for watching, and comment, rate, subscribe.